Hey guys, welcome to the Socially Stetson podcast. Today I have one of my friends, Jean Geddes, on as a guest, and she's a different guest. She's not somebody who is truly in the social media marketing world. She's actually in the real estate world. And you may be thinking, well, what does she have to do with social media and marketing? But Jean is in my local Charlotte networking group. We had a consultation at a coffee shop, and Jean was telling me about this book that she wrote. And it was about mental health. And I'm going to let her talk about her journey, what the book is about, and a little bit about who she is. But with mental health being such a big hot topic right now in life, 2025, social media, I thought she's the perfect guest to have on here today to talk about some different things. And I have so many good questions to ask her. So, Jean, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being my guest. Tell the audience a little bit about what you do, who you are first, and then tell us a little bit about your book.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for allowing me to join you on your podcast. I'll confess this is the first podcast I've ever participated in. So this is new for me. So my name is Jean Geddes. I've been a real estate broker for almost 30 years in North End, South Carolina. I grew up in a fairly large family. I had two older brothers and one younger sister. And my oldest brother is the one that is the subject of the book that I wrote. The next brother in between me and my oldest brother passed away. He was in an automobile accident several years ago in Reno, Nevada. And my younger sister is still living. Both my parents have passed away. So my brother never got married. So he's basically by himself. He's all alone. So I didn't know him very well growing up because there's 6 years between us. And by the time he was 10 years old, he was running away from home. So I never really knew him very much growing up. And when he was 17, he joined the Marine Corps with my parents' permission, served in the Marine Corps for a number of years, and then was discharged. When he was discharged, then he was an adult. He got a job, moved away from home. So I never really knew him growing up. And about 4.5 years ago, we reconnected. He had been homeless for a number of years and drifting from state to state. So we reconnected. I always texted him every year on his birthday, a happy birthday text. And normally that was just, just thank you. And then he disappeared again for, months and months at a time. But 4.5 years ago, he sent me a thank you for the birthday text and a much longer text, which was a little unusual. So I responded to that text, and that was the beginning of our reconnecting as siblings, brother and sister, and rekindle the relationship. And so that was how it started. And that was where, as I was getting to know him again as an adult, he was, 60, he's 67, he would have been 62 or 63. And of course, I've been married, and my two daughters are grown and gone, so I'm an empty nester. But that started our journey of reconnecting and reestablishing our relationship. So that one, in the process of learning to get to know him, I discovered, or he shared with me, that he was diagnosed in 2015 as bipolar manic depressive. And that was news to me. I've never dealt with that before, to my knowledge. But that was the start of a very tumultuous journey to try and work our way through the bipolar and the symptoms and the treatments and the unknown factors. It was just completely, I was basically shooting in the dark. I had no direction, right. no information about the disorder and how to handle it.
Right. And I know as a realtor, relationships are important to you, with all of your clients and stuff like that. What made you want to even put the energy into understanding your brother? Because you could have easily said, no, this is too much.
Well, basically, that's what he had been encountering most of his life, was that, some people would try to help him for a certain period of time. Well, after a certain length of time, he would get on their nerves, and they would get tired of it, and they would basically just say, okay, I've done enough. I've tried to help. You're not helpable. You're not helping yourself. So basically, I've had enough. I quit. And everyone had done that. My younger sister had tried to work with him for a couple of months, and he basically, stepped on her toes, and she basically said, okay, I don't want to have anything more to do with you. But my main goal with getting to, rekindling the relationship was that I had never known or been convinced that he had accepted Jesus Christ as his Lord and Savior. And the other three siblings, myself and my other two siblings and my parents, all did when I was 12 years old. We all, as a family, was going to a church, and the pastor had a life in the spirit class. So the family, myself, my brother, and my sister, and both my parents all accepted Jesus Christ that time. And so I know exactly when we did. But my oldest brother Charlie was not with us; he was on the road somewhere. So my main motivation was to, at some point in time, lead him to the point to where he would accept Jesus Christ, because that was my goal. Was, that when he dies, I want him to be in heaven with the rest of us. So that
Right.
was my
Oh,
main
I love
motivation.
that. That's great motivation. And that just shows what type of person and character you are. So thank you for that, because you're doing the Lord's work down here. And let me tell you, it's not easy. It's
No,
not
believe me, I
easy.
know it's not.
He does it. Yeah, he doesn't. So tell me a little bit too, because you said he was homeless, and I don't think we've said on the podcast yet what mental disorder he had. Or struggles with, because you don't just like get rid of it.
Right.
So tell me a little bit about how he ended up from A to B, like growing up with a great family to ending up homeless, not realizing he had this mental health disorder.
Well, and I'm guessing that it probably came from my dad, because the more I learned about it, the more I learned that it is basically hereditary. So it is passed down, through the generations. But I never realized that growing up, because my mom shielded us, from the symptoms of bipolar that
Mm-hmm.
my dad had. But now that I know more about it, looking back on my life growing up, I can see that yes, he did demonstrate a lot of the symptoms of being bipolar. But he was never diagnosed with it, never treated for it, because back then it wasn't really a recognizable
Right.
ailment or disorder. As far as, my brother started running away from home when he was 10 years old. We touched on it just basically, briefly in the book, that before I was born, my dad had a very successful job in a chemical sales company, and was very close to the his supervisor, manager, and was being groomed to come along, grow, along corporate, climb the corporate ladder, and was doing very well, very successful at it. And then an accident where the supervisor had an automobile accident, was killed. It just completely threw my dad into a tailspin. So he went through a period in his life where he was searching for answers, and that was where he stumbled on a my brother calls it a cult. I'm not sure it's a cult or not. It was Garner Ted Armstrong, Herbert W. Armstrong, and Garner Ted Armstrong had a quote unquote Christian organization in California, and my dad bought into it.
Mm-hmm.
Hook, line, and sinker, which definitely disrupted the way my brother had been raised. And my brother was about
Right.
10 when that happened. And so, he was, the rules changed, everything changed that my brother was accustomed to. And being the rebellious type, he wouldn't knuckle under to it, or he wouldn't accept it. So he started running away from home as as in protest. So until he was between 10 and 17 years old, he ran away from home at least 50 or 60 times. And
Wow.
when I was growing up, my memory of my brother was my parents being on the phone with the latest state trooper trying to figure out how to get my brother back home. And then they would get him
Wow.
home, and he would walk in the door and out the back, and he was on the road again. So when he was 17, he wanted to join the Marine Corps. So they gave early permission. Normally, you can't enlist until you're 18, but they gave him permission at 17 to enlist, and he loved the Marine Corps. He did very well in Paris Island. Then he graduated Paris Island, was sent to Camp Lejeune on the coast, and he ran into trouble there where he, in training, he fell and broke his arm, and they had to operate on it several different times, and he never recovered from it. So they gave him an honorable discharge. Well, that threw him into a tailspin, because he didn't want to come home. So he just basically got a job at convenience stores, and whatever he could find a job doing. He would live in the YMCA. He would get an apartment. So he'd live with friends. I never really knew him at that period of his time because I was a young teenager and growing up, and had my life. And so he ran through a lot of difficulties, but long story short, he wound up doing some prison time for, sometimes he would clean out the safe of the convenience store that he was working at and take the money and run. Well, he did some prison time. So he's had a really rough life. And so when he got out of prison the last time, then he had nowhere to go. He had no
Mhm.
income, no job. He was on Social Security, so he was making a little bit of money each month. So he wash dishes at a Golden Corral to make some money, but he would basically live in the cab of his pickup truck, and that was where he was homeless. And he
Wow.
did that for about 6 or 7 years. He would, move to Florida, Jacksonville, Florida, because it was warmer down there for him to live in the cab of his pickup truck, and then he would move back up to Charlotte just to try and touch base with my mom before she passed away. And so we never really reconnected, but that was how he became homeless. And then in, I believe, 2018, I believe it's 2018 and 19, a social worker that he was working with recommended a psychologist in Union County that could possibly help him because he was having mental trouble. He was having the bipolar episodes and attacks that he didn't know what was wrong. So that was when he went to the doctor and they diagnosed him as bipolar manic depressive, and then they recommended he start working with a psychologist in Union County, Monroe, who then found out he was a vet and that he had served time in the Marine Corps. Well, they put him in touch with the VA, and the VA said, "Oh my gosh, you qualify for 100% disability, and you should have been collecting disability for the last 30 years," and had not been. So all of a sudden, he was, from being homeless, he now was being supported by the VA department, the government. He now had money. That was where he moved out of his cab of his pickup truck and got a motel, in an extended stay motel, and that was where we connected. He was staying in, I believe it was Stallings, an extended stay, when I texted him happy birthday in July, and then he responded back to me, and we started our texting relationship. But that's how he got from being homeless. The psychologist, whom I have met a number of times, supported him, completely supported him and helped him out tremendously by putting him in touch with the right VA representative and getting him approved for 100% disability. So that has been a huge blessing.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, just the fact that he had some of that support that he could have been getting for 30 plus
He
years
wish.
is sad because they do need to educate some of these military, like,
Yes.
that's a whole nother podcast episode.
Yes,
But
exactly.
what are some of the symptoms, as somebody who hasn't really experienced, or maybe I have experienced people with bipolar disorder and I just don't know. What are some of the symptoms that you said? You said your dad had some, and obviously Charlie has some. So, what are three symptoms that maybe somebody should maybe like have a little alert awareness about?
The biggest thing that was the most startling thing to me was he and I would text. I never really talked to him by telephone very often in the early part of our relationship because he was so depressed and he was just so down, and to talk with him just brought me down. It was just very depressing to try and speak with him. So we just texted back and forth mainly, and his texting would be reasonable. You could follow his thought train. Well, then all of a sudden, something would trigger one of his bipolar episodes, and all of a sudden, he would spiral into complete, almost delirium, hallucinatory,
Mhm.
conversation. You couldn't reason with him. He was completely enraged, um, suicidal. Everybody was out to get him. Just all of a sudden, he just went off the deep end, and I would try to reason through that with my texting, and every text that I would send would just fuel that enragement, that rage, and that deep hatred and, you know, hatred of life, hatred of everything. And then eventually it would wear off. And then I texted him after that happened 2 or 3 times within a, you know, short period of time. I asked him, I said, what is going on? You're normally lucid. We can have a conversation, a texting conversation. You make sense. And all of a sudden, then you go off the deep end and you hate everything and hate everybody and everything's horrible. And everything I say, you just, I can't reason with you. What's going on? And that's when he texted and said, I tried not to tell you this. I didn't want to tell you this because I'm deeply ashamed of it. I've been diagnosed as bipolar manic depressive. And I said, well, what's that? And I had no idea.
Right.
And he just said, well, it's a disorder, a mental disorder. I'm basically crazy. I said, well, I know you're crazy, but I've always known that. You're my older brother. And I said, I'm the pesky little sister. So I started doing some research on it and, you know, found out there's not a cure for it. They don't know what causes it. There's no
Right.
cure for it. The only thing you can do is treat the symptoms, to try and control the symptoms. Luckily, his manic depressive is not a violent form, but people with violent forms of bipolar, you know, can harm other people because they go through those rages and they're not in
Right.
control of themselves, you know, when they're doing that. So
Right.
when I found that out, I said, well, you know, what can we do about it? And he said, well, there's nothing we can do about it. I'm trying to get help from my
Right.
doctors and, you know, my primary care physician and my psychologist is trying to help me. And at least I have some income now so I can, you know, I'm off the street. I'm not in the cab of my pickup anymore. And so he asked me to help him find an apartment because he was paying almost $1,800 a month for the extended stay. And so I found him an apartment, moved him into his apartment, and decided then that, you know, okay, I'm going to try and help him deal with this. And if the only thing that happens is that he accepts Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, then mission accomplished. If nothing else happens,
Right.
then I've done what I set out to do. And so that was where, you know, I made the decision and the commitment that I'm not giving up. And believe me, he tried hard to get rid of me and try to get me to quit, give up on him, because I have not, it hasn't been easy on him either. But I was determined that I am
Well,
not giving up.
yeah. I wanted to point that out. Like, this journey, he did not choose for himself.
No.
And so, right. And so he has had it not easy. And, but because of his journey, and I do think a lot of people's journey, we don't realize how our decisions, our actions, what we go through really do affect the people that love us. And so for you, I know one of the key parts in your book that I wanted to talk about was you started using writing as a therapy and journaling. And that's actually what led to this book. So can you talk about how even this book got started through your journaling process?
Absolutely. Well, his psychologist is a wonderful psychologist. He's an elderly man. I didn't name him in the book because I didn't know if the doctors would want to be named. We just named him as their title. But when the rages would hit my brother, and as a therapy, the psychologist suggested that he write out his memories, because the memories of what he had gone through was what was fueling his rages and hatred and, you know, despair and depression. And so the psychologist said that writing is a good therapy because sometimes you can write down your feelings and your memories better than you can verbalize them, and better than you can, you know, put them into words. So my brother started doing that. And so, but to do that, he couldn't use a computer. He didn't know how to type. And so I would have him text what he wanted to write down as his therapy. I bought a computer program to transfer the texts into a Word document, and then I would print them out and he would take them to his psychologist for his psychologist to read over so they could discuss it. So from day one, I was in the middle of it because he couldn't type on his computer. He has since learned. I've educated him a lot. But I would, you know, transpose his, you know, transcribe his texts to Word documents and send to his doctor. Well, his doctor, you know, said that, you know, the way he was writing it out had a very folksy, you know, style of writing. And so my brother, you know, being my brother, he thought that the doctor, his psychologist, was saying that he was extremely talented as a writer and that he was the next Mark Twain. And so that immediately, you know, my brother immediately thought he was the next, you know, Mark Twain, so he was insisted on, instead of writing his memories out as therapy, he was going to write a book, and it was going to be a best-selling novel. And all of a sudden, and of course, being trying to help him, he wanted me to help him put that book into words and writing it. And so 3 different times I tried to help him do that. And I think we went into that briefly in the book. But all 3 times it crashed and burned, it failed. And so
Right.
the third time I said, that's it. I'm not helping you on this book anymore. This is ridiculous. I don't have time. I have to work. I have to support myself. And so that was where the writing came in. And as I was helping him try to put his thoughts into a coherent book that you could actually read, that's where I found out that I enjoy writing. And
Mhm.
so that was what kind of inspired me as we started making progress in treating and dealing with his symptoms, and begin to see improvement, even though it was small at first and very slow. As we saw improvement, that's when I started saying, if there were a book like this out there that I could have read to show me what maybe I was doing wrong, that was complicating matters, then I would have learned a lot faster rather than trial and
Right.
error. That's when I started suggesting, well, maybe we should document this and write this down, because maybe somebody else is going through the same thing that I was going through, shooting in the dark, just having no direction whatsoever, and basically just try anything you can try, throw it on the wall and see if it sticks. But that was
Mhm.
where we came up with the idea of chronicling our journey of from start to finish, and that's why the book is to be continued, because it's not over yet. And we
No, it's
definitely
not.
made a lot of progress, but there's going to be several more chapters coming with it. But
Yeah.
that was where
I love
writing came
that.
in.
Well, I won't save this to the end, but to wrap it up, to tell people how much the book is and where
Oh,
they can buy it.
thank
Because
you.
I love this part.
Yes, it is. Right now, it is 99 cents on Amazon Kindle Select. We're doing a promotion from starting next Wednesday for 5 days, that you can get the book for free. We would like to give it away to as many people that would like to read it, and you can give it to your friends, and their friends can give it to their friends and get it free for 5 days. We would love to have some feedback to see if there's anything that we said that might be helping people, or if they've got suggestions that you would like to ask us, that we could maybe pinpoint on our next book, on our follow-up book, that we could deal with. But it is for sale. It is published on Amazon Kindle, and when we do charge for it, it's only 99 cents.
I
We
love
didn't
that.
write this book for profit. We want this book to try and help as many people as we possibly can.
I love that. And so we will definitely, wherever this podcast is posted, we will have the show notes and the link to Jean's book so we can get that out there. Jean, before we wrap it up, are there any questions that you have for me or anything we didn't cover that you want to go over?
One thing is that I know you're big in social media, and how can social media help us promote the book and get it in front of as many people as possible, simply because it's a book that we want to help people that are going through the same thing we're going through. But I know that social media, and I'm not a good social media person, which is why I reached out to you.
You're so great. Thank you so much. I Social media is a great tool, and I will say probably YouTube Shorts or TikToks, just describing your journey, storytelling, taking maybe chapters of the book, and maybe even just reading a paragraph in
Okay.
short form, little video clips, because
Okay.
people will relate to
Right.
that, and people love storytelling. They love following a journey through storytelling, and then that call to action. So at the end of every video, you just say, if you know somebody struggling with a
Okay.
bipolar disorder, manic, then maybe this book is for you. And be sure to say it's only 99 cents. It's less
Yes.
than $1.
Okay.
And then you can post that link right in your stories, post about
Okay.
it every day, but it's educating people. So just like you said, you didn't know what it was.
Right.
You were like, what is that? It's telling people what it is and what to look for in the symptoms, because if they don't even know that they need this book, they don't even, but they might hear something and say, oh my gosh, my mom does that, or my
Exactly.
son does that. And they might have a 10-year-old son who's running away from home, and they can
Right.
catch this early.
Yes.
And so It is very valuable. So again, it's just consistency, and it's that passion of getting that story and the message out there. So social
Okay.
media can absolutely be a great tool. But storytelling would be the way that I go through that, and just
Okay.
not being scared to push the sale.
Perfect. That sounds
So
great.
I love it. So last, I'll finish on this because you are a Mark Twain aficionado.
Yes.
So you do love Mark
Yes,
Twain.
I do. Although, believe
And
me, my brother does not write like Mark Twain. He does not, not even remotely.
you know what? I'm going to give Charlie some hope. Charlie, you still could be a best-selling author. 89% of people have a book idea in their head, but they never do it.
Right.
So the fact that you and Charlie have even put this book together and written it out, y'all are doing
Yep.
better than most. So Charlie, I know you might be listening to this podcast. Don't give up. Don't listen to Jean when it comes to your writing skills.
Well,
You're probably a better writer than most.
well, we do have a book coming up that we are going to finish working on. Was his book that we tried 3 times to do. It's actually titled "The Pied Piper of Humboldt County," and we're going to finish it. And it will be a novel, but and we're still collaborating on how we've got about 36 chapters written in it, so it'll be a 45, 50 chapter book. But we will be working on that when time permits, but we wanted to get this book out there to help as many people as possible. And that's why I wanted to reach out to you, Stetson, because I know that you're so helpful with ideas and how to promote things on social media. We'll be working with you to get this one out in front of as many people as possible.
I love that. Another suggestion, let's just get you on some more podcasts because you're
Perfect.
such a great storyteller too. So that would be a suggestion. All right, Jean. Well, thank you so much for being our guest today. And I will see you at our next networking meeting.
Thank you, Stetson. I really appreciate all your help with this.